Well, that brings up our In Focus tonight, which is Modi Government 2.0 grand swearing in tomorrow. And to talk about it, we have Dilip Sinha, former diplomat, in our studio with us. Dilip Sinha, that's going to be quite an occasion tomorrow when the Prime Minister is sworn in for a second time, and remarkable the fact that this time around, instead of SAARC leaders as he did in 2014, he's invited the BIMSTEC leaders, and that has been a focus for his first term, as well, as soon as he realized that SAARC is being impeded, it's being held back because of the kind of attitude that Pakistan has had.
Yes, that's true. In fact, this is also a reassertion of 2 points. One is that India's neighbourhood doesn't only include SAARC countries. India's neighbourhood actually extends beyond the South Asian region that we...
Neighbourhood First Plus.
Exactly. Myanmar is also part of India's neighbourhood, yes, as is Thailand. So that feeling that India is cramped into a South Asian region only is a very limiting factor in our understanding of India's regional status. Besides, it also emphasizes the Act East policy of the government. And it also brings into focus this relatively new organization. BIMSTEC is only about 2 decades old, and it started off as a very small organization of 4 countries, and then it's now expanded to 7 countries. So it's a reiteration of both these points, that India's neighbourhood extends beyond South Asia, and also that we have an Act East policy which we wish to emphasize, and BIMSTEC is going to be the vehicle of that.
Right. And how do things stand really in BIMSTEC? Because we've seen that there's been a lot of emphasis on connectivity and of course boosting security, cooperation as well. But the scope of even trade, I believe, is some people are saying at least 5-fold.
Yes, BIMSTEC is an aspirational organization. It's still an organization in the making. There's an negotiation going on for a free trade area. It is not an easy organization to deal with because it cuts across 2 regional organizations, the SAARC and ASEAN. Okay. 2 of the members, Myanmar and Thailand, are members of ASEAN, and India and the other countries are members of SAARC. So it has this cross-regional importance, which is important, but it also makes negotiations slower. But it's also extremely important because that means that when it succeeds, it will link India very strongly with ASEAN.
Mm-hmm. And where do you think rapid progress could be made? Because the Prime Minister will be having some bilaterals as well after the swearing-in ceremony with some of those leaders who are coming in.
Well, yes, bilaterally, of course, all these countries are extremely important. Our relations with Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all these countries are extremely important, as in Myanmar and Thailand. But in terms of the BIMSTEC importance, the fact that we are now looking at this the Bay of Bengal region, and the fact that not only is free trade area important in this, but also disaster management, the utilization of the maritime resources of this area. That is extremely important because all these countries are around the Bay of Bengal, which has so far not been very
developed
in the news.
Yes.
And besides, it is also a region in which there is relative peace because all these countries, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, have resolved their maritime disputes through international mechanisms, and that's extremely important. That means that
we've resolved our territorial dispute with Bangladesh as well.
Exactly, with maritime dispute also.
Highlights of the first term of the Modi government.
Absolutely, the maritime dispute was resolved, as also between Bangladesh and Myanmar and Thailand. So this shows the commitment of these countries to utilizing international mechanisms and resolving their disputes through peaceful means, which is the whole idea behind regional cooperation.
Let's also bring in Sanjay Singh, political editor of firstpost.com. He's joined us now. Sanjay, welcome. And what do you make of the way this ceremony has been planned? It's not just about BIMSTEC, which sends out a key message to the entire international community, especially those who, such as countries in Central Asia as well. Kyrgyz president is also coming in, apart from Prime Minister Jagnod of Mauritius. But domestically, very potent message when invites have been sent out to the kin of those who've been, BJP cadres who've been killed in West Bengal instances of political violence. Mamata Banerjee has not been able to appreciate it, but this would have been taken note by so many other people, not just the BJP's cadre.
Yeah, Gautam, first of all, Rashtrapati Bhavan is looking beautiful. The lighting and the decor that is going there and the arrangements that are being made are simply superb. Being there tomorrow evening would be a pleasure for anyone, whosoever is invited among 6,000 invitees. Of course, you were talking at length about leaders from Prime Minister and Head of State from BIMSTEC. And then follows all diplomats and captains of business and industry and celebrities of various hues. Then you have leaders of opposition, parliamentary party leaders, BJP office bearers, leaders from the state, from their allies. Then you also have people from, say, like you mentioned, those kins of those who were killed in West Bengal in political violence, as also a lot from media, and the list goes on and on, around 6,000. This is, I think, biggest of its kind, any ceremony that has taken place in Rashtrapati Bhavan. So arrangement side, this would be a challenge for those concerned in organizing it, but the message of it, last time when Modi took over on 26 May 2014, he invited SAARC leader. This time he expanded, this time he is inviting BIMSTEC plus Mauritius and some other countries where India has some special relationship. Then the purpose of making it outdoor than doing it inside Darbar Hall is also to make it a public event. There have not been many occasions when this has taken place in forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan. I think 2 other occasions besides second occasion after the Prime Minister Modi himself. The message that goes from there, that Modi, of course, he is taking his own people along, and also the international community and those who are immediate neighborhood of India. And therefore, I think also the kind of cabinet formation that would be there, partners, various partners, I think like JDU was not present last time, they are going to be there. AIDMK was not there, perhaps somebody from there is going to be in the Council of Ministers. So that way, I think that process should also be keenly watched as to which area, which leaders are going to be inducted in Council of Ministers.
But Dilip Singh, what do you make of this invite, two different kinds of invitations really, if you look at how the world is these days, one for the Kyrgyz president and then for Prime Minister Jugnauth?
Well, it goes beyond. As I said, BIMSTEC is an important organization, but there are other neighbors also that are important. And the Kyrgyz Republic has been invited because they are the chair of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization right now. And Mauritius, obviously, because Mauritius is a traditional friend of India. But one I think perhaps sad downside of this has been that 2 other important neighbors, Afghanistan and Maldives, have got left out because SAARC was not invited. Perhaps they too could have been added to this list because they're extremely important and friendly neighbors of India. So I feel sad for them.
Okay. Well, let's return to what's happening as far as domestic affairs are concerned. Well, on the eve of the swearing-in ceremony, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has sent a letter to the Prime Minister asking to be left out of the new Council of Ministers on health grounds. He'd been soldiering on so far in the midst of treatment, but informed the PM now in writing of his desire to be allowed a reasonable time for himself, his treatment and his health. Later, Prime Minister Modi also met Arun Jaitley at his residence.
Just a day before the swearing-in ceremony of the new government, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley Wednesday wrote to Prime Minister Narendra Modi saying he does not want to be a minister in the new government, citing health reasons. He had posted on Twitter the letter he wrote to the Prime Minister requesting recusal from being a part of the new government on health grounds. I am writing to you to formally request you that I should be allowed a reasonable time for myself, my treatment and my health, and therefore not be a part of any responsibility for the present in the new government. Jaitley was admitted to AIIMS last week to undergo tests and treatment and was discharged on Thursday, the day results of the Lok Sabha elections were announced. He unfortunately could not attend celebrations at BJP headquarters that evening after the party's historic win. In the letter, Jaitley said during the last 18 months he has had some serious health challenges. My doctors have enabled me to emerge out of most of them. After the campaign had concluded and you were leaving for Kedarnath, I had orally informed you that even though I was able to discharge the responsibilities assigned to me during the campaign, I would in future for some time like to keep away from any responsibility. This will enable me to concentrate on my treatment and health. Jaitley was the leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha from 2009 to 2014 and leader of the House from 2014 onwards. While as finance minister he steered through parliament major economic legislation such as GST, which had languished for nearly 2 decades. He has also played a key role in getting through several other laws such as the bill to ban Muslim instant divorce practice known as triple talaq, and also articulately defended the Rafale fighter jet deal. He entered parliament at the age of 47 when he was nominated to Rajya Sabha from Gujarat. In 2014, he was made the finance minister and also handled briefly the additional charge of defence and information and broadcasting ministries. With Bureau Inputs, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Well, let's talk about this as well, because if Arun Jaitley is not there, that opens up a big possibility for the induction of someone of high stature in the Union Cabinet. And Sanjay Singh, what is your perspective on this? The Prime Minister visited Arun Jaitley in the evening as well, and we'll probably know what it was all about perhaps only tomorrow.
Yeah, see, Prime Minister Modi's and Arun Jaitley's relationship dates back to decades. When Jaitley was a young leader from DUSU and also an activist from AVVP and the BJP, and Narendra Modi was a pracharak and was coming to Delhi principally to pursue his bachelor degree. And from there on they had this relationship, the particular camaraderie, friendship, and then subsequently they grew together in political life. He was a very good friend and a very trusted colleague in terms of almost everything. Today, when Prime Minister Modi visited Mr. Jaitley's house, of course, that is in pretext to the letter he sent. And the letter, of course, he made it formal a day ahead of a swearing-in ceremony of a Council of Ministers. This was being talked about for last few days. His health conditions was being talked about as to whether or not he would be able to join the government. And he himself cleared the air and put rest to all kinds of speculations that were there. He had been a very trusted colleague for Mr. Modi, able Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and a very articulate leader. Perhaps I would rate him as the most articulate leader in the BJP, a person with great deal of intellectual heft, and also administrative acumen, a very good political strategist. And hopefully he would continue to be so once his, he fights his health conditions and comes out well. And today him going there, I think it's more of a kind of asking about his health, how he is progressing, and also to inquire various other things, because of the kind of relationship they have, and also if at all some inputs have to be exchanged about government formation and so on and so forth. Remember, Mr. Jaitley had very vital say in 2014.
There were some news channels, some other people speculating that the PM has gone to convince him to stick around still, but do you feel that's possible when Mr. Jaitley has indicated himself that he would like some time to heal?
Yeah, precisely. He must have talked about it, but fact remains convincing him as if this is purely for health reasons. And the kind of relationship they have, Jaitley will not surprise Modi by writing this kind of letter.
I think he mentioned that, he spoke to him first earlier.
When he was going to Kedarnath and prior to that. Otherwise, he is person who should have been holding fort during campaigning somewhere in some part of strategizing, talking to people, to marshalling out troops. And we have seen him as a strategist, as a public campaigner, as somebody who is kind of always very energetic, coming out with new thoughts and ideas. So I think if he is not there in ministry tomorrow, most likely so, because he has himself said so, I think that's a loss for...
Well, we avoided speculating about, who will become what in the new Council of Ministers, and we will not do that at this point. This is literally the 11th hour. There's only just a few more hours to go. We'll find out when we hear the names. When we hear the names being called out. But what's also happened is that Time magazine has come out with an article that says Prime Minister Modi has united the country like no other Prime Minister. in the new issue of Time. An article titled "Modi has united India like no Prime Minister in decades." Founder and Chief Executive of London-based media organisation India Inc. Group, Manoj Larwa, has written an article in which the PM has been highly praised. An excerpt reads, and I quote, "Modi united India like no Prime Minister in decades. Narendra Modi was born into one of India's most disadvantaged social groups. In reaching the very top, he personifies the aspirational working classes and can self-identify with his country's poorer citizens in a way that the Nehru-Gandhi political dynasty, who have led India for most of 72 years since independence, simply cannot. No Prime Minister has united the Indian electorate as much in close to 5 decades." Dilip Sinha is with us. Dilip Sinha, what do you make of this telling comment, especially from Time magazine? It seems that Time magazine sands shifted quite a bit in the course of the counting of votes.
Yes, it feels good to see articles like this in the international media, but one must remember, as you mentioned, Time magazine was the one that called him a divider-in-chief just a few weeks ago. So one should take these things with a pinch of salt. The international media, especially many of these magazines, have their own access to grind, their own biases. We have to look at what our verdict is, our people's verdict, and what our assessment is, rather than worrying too much about what the international media has to say. Especially Time magazine is not the most leading magazine of this kind in the world. They are better observers of international
and perhaps
events.
a better parameter for judging the way this election and its result has been received is the congratulatory message that have poured in from world leaders of all kinds, of all nature of countries, really, ever since, even before, in fact, soon after the exit polls came out, we had messages dropping in.
Absolutely, and we should have self-confidence to know that we are a major country in the world, and everybody looks to us to play a certain role in international affairs. We don't need certificates from any magazines or newspapers of this.
Yes, and Sanjay Singh, in terms of the swearing in tomorrow, apart from looking at what's on the menu, what the country is really eyeing is what's on the menu for the country, for all sections of society, the poorest, people who are looking for tax cuts as well. So there's a whole nature of different kind of aspirations that the Prime Minister has indicated that he will cater to, and we might see some of that unfolding even in the sense of who he appoints in which responsibility.
See, Gautam, tomorrow this is going to be a two-phase program. First phase and second phase, of course, is not a public program, but of course swearing in ceremony where we are going to see as to how many ministers are going to take oath, in the sense the cabinet ministers and Minister of State. Some of them would be independent charge. And also
you get to know about the responsibilities in the course of the night?
Yeah, and that would come later, and also we would count as to how many women are there, last time how many were there, and then a whole lot of other side stories that come around with them, and also the profile of some of the ministers. That would be very interesting, because some of ministers we know from the outgoing minister are surely to be there, say about 2/3 would be there. The addition of 1/3, as I judge it, the addition of 1/3, their profile as to who they are, which part of the country they are coming in, what had been their contribution to the society and to the polity, all those things would be analyzed.
There is always talk about representativeness as well, and in this context there's of course JDU, which has got a good crop of MPs. There's the BJP's own crop of MPs from a state like Karnataka, for instance.
Yeah, precisely. And they have also done well in West Bengal,
yes.
Orissa, of course. West Bengal, we had 2 ministers, both MOS, and this time they have 18 MPs from there. Then you have also good numbers, 8 from Orissa, and also southern representation as to how it goes. And then when portfolios are announced, all eyes would be as to who gets finance minister, and the biggest thing for tomorrow would be whether or not Amit Shah gets into the Council of Ministers. He of course has great stature in the party, and also has proven that he is one of those finest strategists, political strategists, and also somebody perhaps I would rate as most successful president from BJP. Of course, previous presidents have had their contributions. Somebody like Advani and Vajpayee created that party.
Coming into government is to happen, then one also has to talk about who will replace him in the party.
Yeah, of course, but he need not immediately, if he gets into the Council of Ministers, the cabinet, he need not immediately relinquish the charge. Of course, BJP follows one person, one post formula, and therefore he has to relinquish this charge, but this does not have to come immediately. He can do that a month later or 2 months later, maybe after this round of assembly elections in Maharashtra, Jharkhand and Haryana, and possibly somebody may take over immediately thereafter. We don't know whether that depends whether or not he gets into the cabinet. The big talk of course is about that, but one thing I have observed this time around, I'm not seeing the kind of hectic lobbying that was going that went on in 2014, 9, 4, 97, 98 and prior to that. Essentially, the Prime Minister's message has been taken well by his MPs, even the serving ministers, and even those aspiring to get into Council of Ministers. And in past 5 years, Modi has, people have seen that no matter how you do your lobby, no matter who you contact, somebody who you perceive to be very influential, having his maybe years to Prime Minister, but that is not, that is not happening this time. People have in his party have actually, and also alliance partner have to select their own nominees. People in his party have taken his message very, very seriously, that lobbying and pushing and pulling could be counterproductive for their fortunes.
Now, Dilip Sinha, we also have to talk about, how this message of the invitation to world leaders and, of course, foreign envoys for the swearing-in ceremony will be taken by the entire world community, because Prime Minister Modi, as soon as he begins work officially after being sworn in, will be engaging with the world quite a bit, even in this year, including the Chinese president. And there will be G20 meet as well.
Yes, there's going to be a busy schedule ahead of him. There's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting coming up. G20, you mentioned, they're coming up in June itself. And then later in the year, President Xi Jinping comes here. In addition, you have the various crises brewing in the Gulf. For example, Iran is an example. This is going to be the most important challenge immediately, because oil prices are already showing trends towards an upward trend. The Gulf is extremely unsettled right now, and one doesn't know what shape it will take. Then there is the trade war between China and the US, and that is impacting stock markets all over the world. It has impacted the stock market in India. That's another issue that India will have to tackle. Anybody who takes over finance and commerce, these people will have
tariffs and an issue between the US and India as well.
Absolutely, that's also extremely important. Then the developments in WTO, where the US is pressing for almost abolition of the dispute settlement mechanism. All these issues are extremely important and difficult issues that are coming up as we enter the last year of President Donald Trump, and then he goes into re-election mode. So all these factors are challenges that will have to be dealt with by the new government.
And of course, Sanjay is saying we've seen a lot of articles being written as well in foreign publications about what sort of agenda in terms of the country's economy will the Prime Minister pursue. Will it be because of the mandate that he's got, will he go full steam ahead on reforms that might seem to be tough, even unpopular, or it will be more in terms of the kind of social welfare bent that he showed in a large part throughout his tenure as well, but even more so in the latter half?
Gautam, people of India really don't care as to what Western media is writing about this government and our polity and our society. You just talked about Time magazine, that reflects on Time magazine and nobody else. That first article itself was condemned. I think that was pathetic in taste.
I think Dilip was being very mild when he said,
yeah, he was. I'm saying very openly, and completely somebody's own mind, what we now call Latins and Khan Market gang, and therefore that was that kind of, and therefore if somebody today, if Time is praising the country is not going gaga and we are not very happy that somebody has changed some positive, some negative articles. Today Amartya Sen has written something. Shall we comment on the writers themselves? Some positive, of course, some write-ups by enlightened people, of course, are important. That shapes policy. That also is some kind of advice to policymakers. But what has lately happened, that they have been so polarized that actually objective view is coming very less, and therefore people have actually stopped thinking in terms of the way you actually write, either targeting him or praising him. And therefore I think the policy makers here are a competent set of people. The policy makers who have been invited by this government would be competent people, and I think Prime Minister's vision, the kind of commitment that he has, he had said in previous times he was focused on fulfilling basic needs, and this time he would address to aspirations. I think the Council of Ministers and the bureaucrats and everybody concerned down the line will have, I think, very, very busy days in times to come.
Naturally. And in terms of the overall foreign policy, Dilip Sinha, how do you see it going forward? Do you feel that it will follow the kind of course that is laid down, that has been laid down in the first term itself of Prime Minister Modi, or do you feel that there might be certain tweaks and adjustments?
Well, the broad contours are going to remain the same, because foreign policy moves on a certain consensus. But as I said, the challenges that come up in between are extremely important. As I said, relations with China will need to be dealt with very, very carefully and cautiously because of the US-China position, and then the Chinese involvement with North
because
Korea.
the 5G domain, again, that's another major geopolitical frontier that needs to be crossed by India. The rest of the world is also, a bit ahead over there. So, and that will also be a big determinant as to which way our economic and foreign policy is going.
Yes, in fact,
it speaks of the tandem.
Yeah, that in fact will be a very important decision, because now that the US has imposed a ban on Huawei, the Chinese company, a telecom company, and Google has gone ahead and broken its relations with Huawei.
Yes.
At this point, whether we go in for Huawei for 5G will have very serious, important, it will be a very important decision with important implications, especially knowing that Huawei has security concerns as well.
Yes,
for Western countries.
Security
Absolutely.
concerns.
So that itself will be a major indicator of which way we are leaning, whether we lean towards China and towards Huawei, or towards South Korea, or towards any other country which can offer us 5G, because we have to go towards 5G to keep our telecommunications up to date.
Yes, and Huawei is, of course, not the only one. It may hold a large part of the market because of certain economic advantages, but there are companies in Europe as well. So there is competition in that field. It's not as if it has to be a Chinese company.
But China offers very competitive prices.
Correct.
And China uses these as foreign policy tools.
And India has to be price sensitive as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. For us, price is very important. So if you go for a global tender and look at the price element, then obviously China will beat everybody else hollow, because they will be much cheaper than South Korea or Europe. At the same time, we have to look at our security concerns, keeping in mind the fact that the Western countries have identified Huawei as a security concern or reliability. For us, China is a lot more difficult neighbor than it is for, let's say, Europe or the US. So we have to keep that in mind when taking this decision on 5G.
And as far as the domestic big ticket issues are concerned, Sajay, the indication had come, when the NDA leaders had met right after the exit polls, and they had come out with a statement, a declaration of sorts, where they had very clearly indicated that a lot of the emphasis of Modi government 2.0 is going to be on infrastructure. They spend majorly on that, and the farm sector. That was also very telltale. So that is a clear indication of in which direction is this government going to be headed starting tomorrow evening.
Two things, Gautam. We had interim budget presented in February, and therefore the main budget has to be presented sometime next month.
Yes.
And the main contours would come.
I think the session is beginning from the 6th of June, maybe.
Yeah, so they're 10th perhaps.
10th? Okay.
Or
we don't have official dates.
We don't have exact dates,
yes.
but that will follow shortly thereafter. And then we'd actually get to know as to what new things this government has to offer. In the meantime, they have made certain promises to farmers. He has also made a promise about some pension scheme for small traders and also for farmers, and waiving that 5-acre ceiling for that Kisan Jan Samman Nidhi Yojana. And the fact that he had said that this time he would be focusing on aspirations, that broadly to me, to my understanding, means that A, job creation, B, stress on infrastructure, C, I think agricultural productivity and raising farmers' income, essentially do things which give put more money in pocket of Aam Aadmi, Indians at large, and
because
also
restart the consumption tax.
Yeah, and I can be happy that some tax relief would be given, or you could be happy that some tax relief,
any
no
tax,
yeah, any relief.
They're all law-abiding taxpayers.
Yeah, and so therefore a great deal of expectation on this government, a burden of expectation on this government in 2014 itself was huge. I think that has magnified. But what the difference between 2014 and now, by now Modi also for having 5 years as Prime Minister, he knows how to move forward, how the system works, and how to speed up that system. He has done so in the past. People in him, he was hoping 2014, during my election coverage while traveling to various parts of the country in the hinterland, I realized that people now have started having some kind of belief in him that he is there to deliver. He is the only person who can deliver. And therefore you have seen this kind of mandate. So, and he says that having aspirations is not bad. This is actually good for the government. That pushes government hard to deliver. And I think we would see some of those measures when the budget is presented.
Well, looking forward to a lot unfolding right after that evening tomorrow at Rashtrapati Bhavan, the swearing-in ceremony, the grand swearing-in ceremony. A lot of people will be looking upon that, not just in the country, but also, you know, at foreign shores all over the world, with a lot of expectations. Thanks a lot for joining us in the time being, Sanjay Singh as well as Dilip Sinha.